Man, college basketball, it's here. It's that time. March Madness is amongst us. Conference tournaments are heating up. Seeing who's going to get into the dance. Bubble teams, we'll take a look at that. There's a lot of job openings. Jim Boeheim just stepped down. So let's talk about, again, the week in college basketball, the week in review. Let's get to it. All right, what's going on, Brian? How you doing, man?
What's up, Big B? I'm doing great as always.
Good. Lot going on, obviously, with college basketball, with March Madness right around the corner, conference tournaments heating up. Um, let's start there. Conference tournaments, we kind of touched on it a little bit last week, and I put a poll out to my K-State people and just kind of asked them because somebody had asked me that question. More important to win the conference tourney and play well moving forward, or more important to get rest, still play well, even if you lose? Is it more important to get rest? I think it's more important to play well and get your rest, even if you don't win the conference tournament.
I agree. We touched on this a few weeks back, and I think it's overrated to go all of the way and win that conference unless you need that at bid, right?
Absolutely.
I think that overall, I'd rather lose a game or two early, maybe in the semis or even a little earlier, and get that 5-6 day rest. Teams who seem to play 4 games in 4 days or 3 games in 3 days, and then they have to turn right back around and play in 4 or 5 days, they seem to struggle. It's your body can only take so much in that short span of time without really breaking down. And I think March Madness is all about being at your best and being healthy.
Absolutely. I think it's more important. I mean, the conference tournament's great, but let's just call it what it is. The conference tournaments, I mean, they give you an automatic bid. I don't even know if they necessarily should, because you see it from the smaller tier conferences. You go all season, basically a 2-month season. You win your conference. Sometimes those teams win it by 3 and 4 games. And then all of a sudden they go to the conference tournament, get upset. They might be 31-3, 31-5, but because they lost in their conference tournament, they can't get in. To me, I think they gotta make that switch sooner or later, man, and just say, look, the regular season champ is who gets the automatic bid, and you still have the conference tournament, absolutely, but the regular season champ has to get that automatic bid, because I just don't think that that's fair. It's March Madness, and we love it, but I'm not sure how fair that is.
Look at the MAC, and I like the MAC. You got Toledo, you have Miami of Ohio, you have Akron, you have Buffalo, you have Kent State, and that conference gets one team in the tournament.
Right.
And Toledo and Kent State, they're in the top 2 of the tournament or in the conference all last season. Akron goes on this amazing run and they win the tournament. And now Toledo with 24 wins, Kent State with 22, 23 wins, both of them are left out. And we got to find a better system, because now everything we've built for is done. We did 26 games of greatness, and then we get left at home because we lost. We had a bad game in the tournament.
Right. And I get it. And look, I'm one of those guys that always says, hey, you didn't have to lose. You could have won. I said, but come on, man. I mean, you go through 2 months of conference play and you win it. And then because you have one bad night, now granted, the NCAA tournament is the same way. I go, but that's the big dance. That's something separate. We're trying to get into the big dance. I'm not sure about conference. Look, conference tournaments are for money anyway. I mean, let's just call it what it is. It's all about money, especially in the Power Five, and throw the Big East in there as well. But it's just a tough pill for some of these schools to swallow. So I absolutely get it. Moving on, let's look at some of these job openings. Look, Jim Boeheim, 47 years. I mean, they're saying he retired. I don't think he actually retired. I think they kind of pushed him out, because if he retired, he would just say, I'm retiring. And he never said that. Well, I gave my speech, last Saturday at home, and nobody picked up on it. I'm like, come on, man. I know he's mad, and that's part of this, and he's trying to be professional, but Uh, what do you think about that? What Syracuse did? I mean, right or wrong? I mean, they pushed them out.
They were right. It reminds me of my freshman year when we played for Coach Crom, a Hall of Famer, a legend, a national champion. But we were 12-19. The year before I got there, they lost in the first round to Creighton.
Right.
And Tom Jurich pushed them out. He actually pushed them out publicly, and a lot of people were very upset that, a legend and Denny Crum, what he did for the university, that they publicly did him the way they did him. I
Right.
think Boeheim was pushed out. I think it probably should have happened 2 or 3 years ago. If you
Yep.
watched them play this year, it was
Yeah.
underwhelming, uninspired. It was really a boring, embarrassing brand of basketball. There, that 2-3 zone that people usually fear, it was atrocious. People lit that zone up all year. I think the kids inside that locker room and the coaching staff knew months ago that this was it, and you could tell they were ready for it to be over.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about Syracuse is they're not getting the kind of players that they used to get. They don't have the kind of talent at Syracuse that Jim Boeheim usually gets. Part of that might be age. He's not going out there and doing the recruiting. He's not doing it. I mean, but the one thing that you know about Syracuse right now versus 5-6 years ago is the talent level that Syracuse has is not up to snuff. And you're right. It was just time. It's just time.
Well, Big B, I'm not an ageist at all, but is it really fun? Is it really sexy when a 70-something-year-old coach comes into your living room and says, I want you to come play for me? No. This is the age of
I don't know. Ask football players when Nick Saban comes into their house.
he's the exception, not the rule. He is the
Okay.
exception, not the rule.
That's
But
fair.
I want a young, vibrant, energetic coach who knows the lingo, knows the music. Even the vibe you get from a Deion Sanders. Like, these older coaches, man, they're just, their feet hurt. They're sitting down in practices. I've seen it, man. They get a
I mean,
little
I
older.
get it. I get what you're saying. I don't know about that, man, because Coach K retired last year, but Coach K was still going strong, man. I mean, he comes into your house, Nick Saban comes into your house. I mean, some of these guys are energetic. Now, I get what you're saying. I 100% understand. I think it just depends on who you are. I think
It's a
it depends on
handful of
who you
coaches.
are.
It's a handful of old school guys who have that legendary status that can still get away with it. You look at Duke, it's a well-oiled machine. That's why Coach K can leave, John Shire can step in year one, and Duke's going to be, what, a 5-6 seed? I mean, because
Oh, I don't know if they're going to be a 5 or 6 seed. Duke's not that good.
so what is Duke, a 7 seed?
Yeah, probably at best a 7 seed. They're not that good.
Fair. Duke, let's see how they finish in the ACC. They're going to be a 6 or 7, probably 7 at worst. I don't think they'll be an 8. But, I mean,
No.
they're the third best team in the ACC, which means nothing. It's Virginia, Miami, and then Duke.
Right.
But I just think ultimately they're still 20+ wins even when Coach K leaves. I don't think they're going to lose more than 10 games in a year. They're no matter who's coaching that program.
Right.
And who knows, maybe 5 years from now I'll look stupid looking back on this. But I do believe it's really a handful of guys at that age that can still come in and win and recruit. I think the new wave is 30, 40s, and 50-year-old guys are dominating college basketball.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's at every sport, pretty much.
Right.
I mean, a lot of guys, gals, whoever, not trying to coach in their 70s. They're trying to be doing something else. So I get it. I 100% get it. Moving on from him, man, it's so disheartening for me because not that he's my idol or anything, but growing up, Patrick Ewing was, I mean, I loved Georgetown. Now, they were never my favorite team or anything like that, but I loved rooting for Georgetown. And Patrick Ewing, when you think of Georgetown, you think Patrick Ewing, John Thompson, Alonzo Mourning, and to see that program the way that it is. Now, you talk about somebody who doesn't want to do the work. I mean, it's out there, so this is not us bashing him. Patrick Ewing, first of all, he's going to get fired. They've been horrible. He doesn't even like recruiting and said so. Doesn't like it, doesn't like doing the work. And I'm like, then why did you take the job? That would be my first thing. But to see that program the way that it is, man, it's disheartening, to say the least.
Being a head college coach and saying you don't like recruiting is like trying to get a woman to marry you and say I don't like romance. You just can't say it. You gotta fake it. You gotta learn to love it. You gotta figure out how to be great at it. You gotta hire guys who are great at it. To be a head coach and say I don't like recruiting is like telling a woman I want to date you, but I don't like romance. Like it
Yes.
just doesn't make sense. Um, a lot of great former players can't coach at a high level. We've seen Larry Bird with the Pacers. We've seen Magic try. We've seen Isaiah Thomas fail at it. Jordan is probably one of the worst GMs we've ever seen. I mean, can we go
Woo.
back and look at Kwame Brown, Adam Morrison, and some of these picks? Elite and great players in their own right, but man, he's just everybody can't be a great head coach, and he's not going
No.
to be one of them. And he's never going to coach again when this is over. He's older now. He tried it, and it's done. It is what it is.
Well, the thing that's frustrating for him, I know, is because he didn't even want to be a college head coach. He wanted to be a pro head coach, and nobody would hire him. He was an assistant for a lot of years, and then he never got the opportunity to be a head coach in the pros. So then he took this job, and I think I don't know what he thought, but he didn't like the recruiting process, and it absolutely shows because Georgetown is atrocious. And
Egos get exposed in recruiting. Hey, I want you to come
absolutely.
to me. I'm Patrick Ewing, and then a kid says, "No, I'm going to go here." And then you're like, "What?" You're scratching your head, like, "But I'm Patrick Ewing." I think that a lot of guys like him, their egos are being affected because they think
Yep.
kids are going to come running to them because of what they've done in the past as
His
players.
problem is that he should have been recruiting. I mean, if you're going to say that as Patrick Ewing, you're talking to somebody's parents because the kids don't know who he is. That's the
True.
thing. The kids, I mean, they weren't even thought about being alive when he was playing. And so that's where the problem is. You know, you talk to somebody's parents and say that, well, that generation has passed, brother. You got to talk to somebody else. You know, you got to talk to these kids, get you some assistants that can go out there and get you some kids. And it's sad. It's sad. And speaking on that train, that sad train, we haven't talked about them in a couple weeks, but we're going to talk about them today, Bryant. These Louisville Cardinals. I am look, I've been battling it out with fans trying to keep the Kenny Payne train rolling. And while I still am going to support them, I give him a paper thin leeway going to next year. I don't want to hear it. Look, I went to Kansas State. I support and love Kansas State. I know what their program was 3 years previous. They were horrible. And look at them now, they can go to the Final Four. So it can be done. So I don't want to hear anything else. Look, the season's over. It was horrible, but it's over. Let's move forward. Now, let's get to work and show me what you can do.
I never gave him a pass for having Coach Max players, other people's players, because they won 13, 14, 15 games or more with the same talent. So couldn't you at least win that many games with someone else's players who won that many games? I think everybody's not built to be a head coach. I don't think everybody is ready to be a head coach. And it's hard for me to feel sorry for you when you make $4 million a year. As a former U of L player, here's what's happened. Everyone wants this to work. We all want it to work. Former players, fans, it makes sense. He's one of us, kind of like Woodson at IU. He's one of us. We've all been behind him and wanting to see this succeed. At what point do you jump ship? The problem is a lot of people have bit their tongue and they refrain from saying anything negative because he's one of us. At what point do we pull off? Okay, do we stop having this kind of unspoken, hey, he's untouchable. We can't say anything bad about Kenny Payne because the former players and the alumni fan base has been silent. It's support, support, support. If they don't win, what is the number next year that he has to win for us to say it was a success? Because winning more than 4 games won't do it. If he wins 10 games, will we say, oh, well, he doubled his wins from last year?
Nope.
He has to come back next year, in my opinion, with a 20-win season.
Absolutely.
Or it's just unacceptable. You're making $3-4 million a year. We want a return on our investment. The attendance has been at an all-time low. No one is going to the games. The players, from what I hear, don't want to be there. They're all ready to transfer, and I'm sure the coaching staff is ready to get rid of them. He does an interview the other day saying that his staff did a good job. I think at some point, people forgive you and people are more willing to give you a pass or work with you if you say, I can do better, I have failed, This is where we went wrong. We have to do better. But when you say, oh, the AD loves me, I love the AD, my coaching staff is great, they're all coming back, we did a hell of a job. I think as a fan base, I'm almost angry, especially if I spend a lot of money on season tickets, especially if I feel invested in the program. That's a smack in the face. It's a lie. They didn't do a great job. They did not do well. It
No.
was sad. It was embarrassing. It was really, really bad. And I think ultimately, former player or not, whether you're, oh, I'm all for him, he's a black head coach, and I want to see, like, throw all of that out the window. It was a disaster.
Right.
Next year, they have to win 20 wins, or I think at some point you have to say this was a bad hire.
Right. No,
It's 20 wins or bust for me.
my thing is, I don't care if you're black, white, if you're a giraffe, if you're a field mouse. If you can help Louisville basketball win as a coach, that's who I want. And for him to do, first of all, you can't, people are able to criticize him. I don't think, whether you're a former player, booster, alumni, fan, whoever, you're allowed to criticize somebody. Now, it's got to be in reality, because 1 year is not enough to jump off the ship. Now, you may say he stinks, you don't want him. And if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. And I'm not talking to you personally, just in generalities. But I think people have jumped off the ship and don't think that he can coach, don't think that he can do it. And it's a failure because we've never seen Louisville be this bad before, and we don't know as fans how to react to that. Our first reaction is he stinks. He's horrible. Get him out of there, because we've never had to deal with it before. So I get all of that. But the reality is he's not getting fired, so he's going to be back. So you have to say, okay, well, where's the cutoff point? Like you mentioned, what's the line? Well, for me, the line in the sand is we got to be right at the tournament next year, either on the bubble or in, period, point blank. Whether that's 15 wins, 20 wins, 23 wins, whatever that number is, we need to be either in the tournament or one of the last four teams fighting for a chance to get in the tournament for it to be a success. If not, then we got to look at what happened. Because first of all, you can say the roster, and the roster does need to turn over. It does. There's guys on the team that just aren't good, and it is what it is. But we did win a few games last year, the previous season. Should have been better. Not having a point guard is strictly on the coaching staff. You didn't go get one. I don't care where they came from. You should have been able to get one guy and not have L. Ellis having to learn to be a point guard and him figuring it out. And I don't even blame him. Never been a point guard in his life, and he's trying to do it at the biggest stage of college basketball. Come on, man. That doesn't work.
I'm disappointed. For me, it's a dream team of coaches. Danny Manning.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Kansas greatness. You have Nolan Smith, son of Derek Smith. Nolan played at Duke. Nolan played in the NBA. You have Kenny Payne, played for the 76ers, won a national title at U of L, coached under Calipari, has ties to World Wide West, is supposed to be a guy who's very connected in the world of Nike. You got a guy like Reese Gaines who's doing video, who's a Louisville legend in itself. Was a top 15 draft pick. I mean, you have greatness sprinkled all through the entire staff. Had they had won 25 games, people would have said that he was a genius. He was great hire.
Absolutely.
No one would have said, oh, but it's Chris Mack's players. Nobody would have said that. He would have got all the credit. Had they won exactly as many games as last year, he would have got a pass. And they would have said, hey, it's coach's players. He goes 4-28, and people are still defending this madness. And I'm just like, guys, you're hypocrites. You're hypocrites.
You can defend his madness and still say they did a horrible job. That's the whole thing. You can say, look, I'm going to give him another opportunity to get this right and want him to get it right. And also say, but you know what? This first year was atrocious. You were terrible. Everything about it was terrible. And I don't think people do that enough.
Wins and losses don't equate always talent and great coaching, right? I'm sure Izzo's has had some not great seasons. Duke has had some, and we know that Izzo and Coach K and these guys are proven, right?
Absolutely.
What we look for is competitiveness, growth. Are we getting blown out every game, or are we growing? Are we getting better? Are we cutting turnovers down? Are we winning rebounding wars? Are we losing by 3 and 4? And you can just see that those 20-point losses turn to 10-point losses, turn to 5-point losses. The last game of the season, we were winning at halftime and lose by 18. I mean, you can
Exactly.
just see
They quit.
these young men, they haven't grown. They quit. I've always been told by other athletes that teams take on the identity of the coaches, or the coach. With that being said, you can draw your own conclusions.
So we got to figure it out, man. He's got to figure it out. Like I said, I don't know if I'm necessarily giving him a pass because I know that he was terrible this year and everything was terrible. I'm just saying, okay, I know the reality of the situation. He's not getting it right, or he's not getting fired, and you got to get it right next year. You just got to get it right. There is no excuses. And I mentioned that before. We have the fan base. Louisville has the money, the fan base, the facilities. They have everything to turn it around. I just watched Kansas State do it. They had 2 guys on their roster, 2, and now they're talking about they could possibly go to a Final Four. So it can be done. And Kansas State, I love them, but they don't have the kind of money or facilities or the fan base that the University of Louisville has. They don't have that. So don't Todd. The excuses are over for him. It's next year or he's got to go.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, there's our rant for today. There's our rant. So let's get it. Let's move on here and let's talk, upset alert in the tournament for me becomes difficult because the matchups are everything. You know that. I think everybody that watches college basketball knows matchups are everything. But who are some teams that you think and we'll just go back and forth with it. Who do you think are on upset alert? My first one is Alabama. I think Alabama is going to be a high seed, and I think Alabama is going to be on upset alert. I just think everything is crashing down on them. And
I wasn't expecting you to say that about Alabama. I think Alabama could use this as fuel, and if they can rally together emotionally and get behind Brandon Miller and use this to drive them versus it being a distraction, it could work. What I remember, and this is a different circumstance, in 2013, University of Louisville had Kevin Ware break his leg, and the kids are crying and they're very emotional, and he goes out and they're playing Duke.
Right.
They're not just playing anybody; they're playing Duke.
Right.
And they use that momentum, they use that emotion, and they end up winning the national title. And the whole theme was win for Ware. Now, I know this is a different circumstance because it's easy to win for somebody who has a season-ending injury. So this is a different animal. But I do think ultimately that they could figure out a way, okay, they could, to use this as motivation. Hey, let's get behind Brandon. Let's block everybody out, and we got to stay together because this group is special.
Right.
But I wasn't expecting you to say that. You kind of caught me off guard with that pick.
Yeah, I think it's something that's a real thing, man. You're dealing with kids and their emotions. I think it's a real thing. And the coach hasn't handled it well at all. So I don't know. One team that I don't believe that's going to be an early exit is Kansas. Kansas, again, I've said it once. I'll say it a million times. I know people at K-State, they get mad at me every time I say it, but I'm going to say it again. Bill Self is the best coach in college basketball, year in and year out. They start off however they start off, and by the end of the year, here they are. And again, here we are at the end of the year. Here they are. And they've got it going. I don't see them being – now, it's happened previous years, but that was 15 years ago. I think Kansas has got something going on again this year.
Mm-hmm. To kind of stay in touch with the upset, making a prediction, who's in trouble, who needs to be wary.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this team maybe more than anybody. I think Purdue is in trouble. They are a 2 seed. They are a 2 seed who's hit a wall. I think people figured them out. So much of what they do goes through Zach Edey. I think that they're in trouble. I think Tennessee, I think we've seen them be a little up and down. I don't really know anymore if I think they're an Elite Eight or a team that's going to make the Final Four.
Nope.
They couldn't beat Kentucky. They've had some games where you're just like, who are you? What are you guys doing?
Yep.
The talent is there, but something's just off with that group. I look at Gonzaga. This is not Gonzaga from the last year or the year prior to that. No. They don't have a Chet Holmgren. I like the Timmy guy, but they don't have that same kind of athleticism and swag. And there's some good players there. They have 1 or 2 guys in this team that'll play in the NBA, whether it be second round, first round. But I think Gonzaga could be in trouble.
Here's the thing, and to cut you off with Gonzaga, this will be a year that they actually go and win it. because all the previous years they've had that talent like you talked about, and everybody's expected them to win it, and then they can't get it done in the end. This year, nobody's expecting them to do anything. I think this can be, and I'm not saying it will be, but I think can be a year where they actually do go and win this thing.
I agree with you there. And I think ultimately there's just good enough where they could make a run. And we're like, hey, look at Gonzaga in the Final Four. Yeah, there's enough talent they could do that. But if I'm their coaching staff, I'm sleeping with one eye open. I'm a little worried. I'm getting those jitters, and I'm wondering, okay, Are we really good enough to do this? You don't want to be the Kentucky of last year who loses to St. Peter's, and Purdue lost to them too. So I just don't want to single out Kentucky. But I think Kentucky's in a similar spot. I don't know if they're going to make the Sweet 16. I don't know if Indiana will. Could they? Of course they could. Trace Jackson Davis is good enough. Kentucky has enough talent. But I think there are two teams that could be missing from the Sweet 16. I think depending on who their seed is in that first and second round, we could see Kentucky and IU leaving early. Now, is that really an upset if Kentucky's a 7 seed and IU's a 5? Yes and no. I just think that for the Blue Bloods, there's a lot of Blue Bloods this year that just need to be concerned.
Exactly. And the one thing about it is that this is not one of those years, just like last year. It's not a year of the mid-major. In previous years, there's been a lot of mid-majors that they get in, they played really well during the year. There's not a lot of that this year, man. There's not a lot of mid-major type stuff because unless you count on St. Mary's, which, technically they're a mid-major, but they just got blown out by Gonzaga, and Houston is not a mid-major. I mean, that's not a mid-major. That conference, you can't consider that mid-major. And Memphis is going to end up making the tournament too. So I don't know. I think you're right as far as blue bloods, Bryant. There's a lot of blue bloods that are playing, but they're not necessarily playing well this year. North Carolina is another one. I mean, they won last night. Great win. I think they got to get 2 more. I really do. I think they got to get 2 more to get into this tournament, man. What do you think?
I think it's easy to want them in. Their fan following, their tradition, their history. A lot of our favorite players that we've ever watched all come from North Carolina. I think the problem is it's hard to. The ACC is the worst maybe it's ever been since we've been alive. We've never seen the ACC this bad. Nope. And we're still talking about North Carolina needs 2 more wins, a team that went to the national title game last year that was winning at halftime against Kansas, and now they're back again this year with 3 or 4 starters. RJ Love and some of these guys, and Armando Bacot, however you say his name, they're all back. And this team is, I don't even know if they're bubble yet. They're like trying to get on the bubble. They almost have to win the ACC. What do they have? 12 losses, 13 losses?
Yeah, it's crazy. The thing about North Carolina, and I pointed this out to somebody yesterday or 2 days ago. If you think about North Carolina last year, they weren't really great. They were a good team. They just got hot at the end of the season. And made a run to the final game. Well, in that case, they just anointed them the best team in the country coming back with all those guys. I'm like, hold on. They weren't the best team in the country last year. At any point in time was North Carolina one of the best 10 teams in the country last year.
Do you remember UConn with Shabazz Napier? They had like 9 or 10 losses. Russ Smith senior year, they beat UConn twice by 20 points, and they won it all. And Russ Smith was like, hey, we beat these guys by 20. UK, when they had the Harrison twins and they made the national championship game. That team had 8-9 losses. So it's all about getting hot at the end.
Absolutely.
I think what we are seeing is teams like Purdue who are struggling. Every game they win is by a couple points. You look at some of these teams and you're like, what happened to you in the third part of the season? That final trimester of the season, they're just hitting walls and falling apart. And I'm worried for a lot of those blue blood teams. Right. Who else in the Big 12 do you think is on upset alert? What do you think about Baylor? What do you think about Kansas State? Do you not see them getting upset, or these teams that you think if they get beat, it's going to be by somebody who's better?
Texas is really good. Texas doesn't get talked about as much, but Texas is really good. Kansas State is also really good. Baylor's has been so inconsistent. If they're making shots, I mean, I know you can say that about anybody, but their entire game is predicated on shots, making shots. If they're not making a bunch of shots, they'll lose to anybody, and so because they don't guard enough. They don't guard well enough to be able to overcome that. So Baylor would be a team that I would say is going to be on upset alert.
This is how good.
Go ahead.
Well, this is how good Baylor is. Kansas proved to me a couple weeks ago they were the best team, maybe second or third best team in the country, because I still think Houston is there. Baylor had them down 14, 15 points, and Kansas came back and beat them by double figures.
Yeah.
And Baylor in the first 10, 12 minutes of the game looked amazing.
Made everything.
It looked like everything. And then they turned around and fell apart, and it was like, okay, it showed me how good Baylor could be, and then it showed me how good Kansas really was. So I was like you said, if Baylor's hitting shots, look out.
Right. And so those are the teams. I just think that Baylor would be the team that's on upset alert. Out west, Arizona's going to be on upset alert, but I don't see them getting put out early, them or UCLA. I think both of those teams are really, really good. I think UCLA is a Final Four team. I do. They've got what you need to be able to make a Final Four, and they're older. They're not a bunch of young guys, and that makes a difference in college basketball these days. If you can get a good blend of young and then some experience, especially at the guard position, you got a chance, and UCLA's got that.
Go back over the last couple of years. All of these teams that have made runs have really, really good point guards.
Mm-hmm.
Baylor had that ridiculously nasty backcourt. Louisville, when they won, had their backcourt. UConn won with that backcourt. I mean, I'm talking Shabazz Napier. I'm talking old UConn with Kemba Walker. If you look at Gonzaga, who made their run, they had, what's the kid's name? Was it Jalen Suggs?
Yep.
Who hit that crazy shot to send it to OT. Yep. I mean, what we see consistently is if you have great guard play, not big men per se, great guard play, you advance, man.
Absolutely. Guard play is everything in NCAA basketball. I mean, it is in basketball in general, but in the tournament, you got to have it. You got to have it. There's too many emotional mood swings that go on in March Madness. You got to
UCLA's got it.
They do.
You were spot on. UCLA has good coaching with Cronin. They have vets, and then Tiger is just the real deal.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. You jumping on again with this, man. We'll look at this again. The tournament, like I said, the Selection Sunday is coming up. Both going to be out of town, so we'll figure something out and get this figured out. We may have to take a week off and come back in the middle of March Madness tournament and go from there, man. So I appreciate you jumping on with us, Bryant.
All right. I appreciate you, Big D. Have a good one.
Uh-huh.